Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Vijay Chebolu. I run the cloud practice for North America. And Matt Nolan, he actually is the architect in the cloud practice at Red Hat Consulting. So between the two of us, we're going to talk to you about how to actually build a bimodal environment in your existing enterprise. And at the same time, building that framework to actually start migrating workloads that make sense from one to the other. Right? We'll actually walk you through what the common pressures are that the business have today. If you look at it, what is it the lines of businesses look for? They actually want to transform their digital business. Everybody wants to be a technology company, right? Whether you're a financial services industry, you're actually a housing company, you're actually a software industry, all you do is everybody's trying to transform themselves into a digital business. They actually want to deliver faster services at a lower cost, beat the competition as much as they can. Because of that push for new applications faster, the developers are actually being asked to write applications faster. So what the developers are asking for is, we spend way too much time managing the infrastructure in our environment, let us focus on writing code, we don't have time to do anything else. We want everything to be abstracted, we actually want to write code and just build our applications. And operations is like, well, if I actually have to manage all your infrastructure, I need to be able to have a good handle on what you're running. You actually have the marketing organization going around them and running, using the credit cards and actually spinning up instances in Amazon, spinning up instances in Azure. The ops team has no clue what's running in their enterprise, and they actually need to get a better handle on what they have. And at the same time, they actually also want to compete with the public cloud environment so they can actually provide the same capabilities in their own enterprise. So if you look at it, overall, the business has actually looked at it over the last 4 or 5 years. We actually seen new trends come up. We've seen that 90% of the CIOs have said they're actually looking towards DevOps to actually transform the processes to make sure they actually can get the agility in their enterprise. 93% of them have said they actually are looking at getting infrastructure as a service deployed in their environment. So that's basically getting a cloud platform, something like OpenStack stood up, or using your existing virtualization and giving all the cloud-like features for their end users so they can actually stand something up. With the evolution of containers, you've seen developers asking more and more of containers in their ecosystem. They actually want to build applications of containers so that they're actually portable across different environments. And 72% of them are saying they actually want to deploy a platform as a service offering so that the application developers can just use a platform and build applications. So we actually looked at this, right? Let's look at the evolution of how we came here. If you look at where we were during the last 10 years, we've actually seen the evolution of your development processes, the application architectures, your packaging, and your app infra. Right? We actually moved from waterfall to a lot more environments that are actually using Agile. They're looking to adopt DevOps to actually innovate their environments. We've gone from old monolithic architectures running on mainframes, huge bare metal servers, to running multi-tier environments on multiple servers, making up an application, to now looking, and the focus is more about how to actually build microservices. If you look at the deployment packaging space, we've actually gone from being able to run on physical servers to virtual servers, and now the new buzz that's going around is containers. Everybody wants to build their applications in containers. And you've seen the evolution of private data centers to using hosting environments, and from hosting environments to actually running stuff in public clouds. Right. So if you look at what does it mean, right? So we talk about, if you look at Gartner's research, they actually call the existence of a mode 1 and mode 2. So if you look at all these blocks here, you'll probably see that mode 1 makes up of everything that was old legacy, with using the old style methodologies, running stuff on virtual servers, running in a private data center. Everything else around it is mode 2. Now, if you look around your enterprise, you'll probably see that you probably have both mode 1 and mode 2, right? One is not going away and the other is not taking over. It's probably still 15, 20 years before your mode 2 next generation applications kind of completely take over your current applications, but they are both there to stay. Now, what does it mean to an operator? You actually have too many tools to manage. You probably have all of these different hypervisors, all of the physical servers, and all of those application environments to manage. So you have a lot of different tools. So what the operators are asking for today is they want something that's universal, something that actually has the ability to manage across all the infrastructures, give them the ability to see what's where, so that when there's a problem, they actually can diagnose it. And as an end user or a developer, you really don't care what's running where. You actually want to be able to deploy your application and let the underlying platform decide where the application needs to go. The ask is you want something that's easy, something that's fast, and something that's modular, where you can actually integrate with everything. So herein comes the value of your cloud migration. Like, you want to consolidate your environments behind a bimodal suite of infrastructure applications. You want something that can actually manage and handle both Mode 1 and Mode 2 environments. You actually want to enable self-service and actually enable provisioning of your services faster. You want to actually reduce your cost by moving to more open source technologies like OpenStack and OpenShift. And you also want to increase your business agility through giving flexibility to your environments. And when you do that, you actually will be left with managing the old and the new. At some point, you want to start migrating your existing environments into the new next generation platforms. But you actually want to do it through an automated process of migrating workloads from one to the other. So at Red Hat, we actually have a solution called as cloud migration, where the goal is to mitigate the risk of migrations from one platform to the other. The goal is to reduce your total cost of ownership of running your platforms, to accelerate the provisioning of an environment so the end users can actually deploy the applications and services faster, so they're actually focused on writing code and writing applications. You actually would want to streamline your process, and at some point, you want to migrate workloads. So what does it mean to actually migrate workloads? For you to actually migrate workloads, it's much more than just moving VMs. The goal is that you probably want to understand what your current state is. You want to actually have a good understanding of what's running today and where you actually would want to go to. You want to actually be able to map applications to different migration patterns. You probably have databases running in one environment. You don't want to put them on OpenStack. You want to move them somewhere else. You have web servers running, which is a good fit to actually go to OpenStack. You want to move them. You have applications that need to be containerized. You actually want to be able to migrate them to containers. So you actually want to be able to map your existing environments and frameworks to the different target architectures. You then need a platform to actually orchestrate the migration. Trying to rebuild every single application environment is going to be very expensive. But if you actually can migrate them to the new platform, deprecate the old platform, gain efficiencies in your cost, and actually build your next generation applications using the cloud native frameworks, you probably would want to do that. You also want to have an infrastructure that's capable of processing that effort at scale. Just assume that you're in an environment where you have thousands of VMs and you need to move them. Moving one VM at a time is going to take you forever. So you actually want to have an automation in place and an infrastructure in place that actually can help migrate those. And at the end, having the technology is not enough. You need to actually have the people and process trained up and enabled to effectively manage the change and actually understand the new paradigm. Matt, you want to take over?
Yep. Oh. Is this working? All right. So at the end of this too, I'm going to have a demo where we can actually show you guys how we do the migration. So that'll be at the end. So the cloud migration philosophy, right? We have the people, like Vijay was talking about. You need the people, you need the process, you need the technology, you need the folks to actually drive that collaboration, putting the right people in place, making sure that you've got all the stakeholders, the folks that it's going to be impacted by this change, the folks that are going to have to manage it, right? And then obviously you got to have the tooling from just the technological component. Make sure you've got that in place as well. So let me click here. So it's talking about the people, right? So there's collaboration and expertise from the Migration Program Management Office and Red Hat Consulting. So the Migration Program Management Office is a collaboration of Red Hat and the customer stakeholders that I was talking about previously. Kind of provide that overarching governance and the management of the processes and the risk, right? So you have to have a plan to get around that, and then the security that secures the commitment from the cross-functional teams, And then the Red Hat Consulting, right? So Red Hat Consulting, us, we've developed this migration expertise. We've done it at large scale, over 10,000 VMs for a large financial services corporation. So we've been through the rigors of this process in a very complex environment. So we have this team to deliver, to manage the architect, the consultants, and a proven approach and experience in doing these mass migrations. It's a holistic approach for migration management and all the orchestration, the automation that's involved in this process. So building the partnership. So, successful migrations require the engagement of the right folks. We need the business owner that's responsible for the migration goals and the business strategy. There's an architect whose responsibility is more around the architecture, kind of oversees the process, moving things in the right direction. The operational team to address the long-term success of the solution, how it's going to be operated, how it's going to be maintained and kept up. The development, which to enhance the developer experience, right? So this is a services engagement, professional services engagement that involves a lot of technology, a lot of development around that. And the testing, right? To streamline the migration and the validation processes. The security and compliance teams to comply with the policies and the standards, and the users, right? The folks who are going to be using the platform to understand and address the end user experience. So we use this Agile Scrum methodology to manage this process, right? Does the rapid delivery, so we kind of get iterative successes as we move it forward. The upfront analysis to kind of determine the LOE, the risk that's involved, the cross-organizational buy-in from the different teams. But the Scrum methodology, the Agile methodology, kind of delivers that sense of claiming victory, right? And these steps that you got to take to move forward is until we get it completed. So the process, right? The high-level migrations. It's a process like I was telling you earlier. We've moved thousands of VMs using this tool, right? And the people and the processes to do so. It's a holistic migration approach for management, the automation and the orchestration, the application analysis for migration targets and the approach, and it's a migration factory, what we call it a migration factory, which is basically the tooling, the templates, all the orchestration, all the scripting that makes it work, right, and kind of manage through that using the migration factory. Okay, so this is more about starting the pre-migration, right? We got the steps that have to be taken. So you'll have an application owner to identify, kind of group the workloads. We figured the way it really works best is to get in there and understand the applications. We got to work with the app owners, kind of group these applications together to make sure that it makes sense. It's the most logical way to do it, right? So we have these migration groups that get identified. Then we'll go through the application. The application owner will create a validation plan. So when VMs come up on the other side on the new platform, that there's a way to go in there and validate that everything works the way it's supposed to. Everything is good to go. So the next step is create the network, check quota on the POA. The POA is point of arrival. So there's POD, which is the point of departure, and POA meaning the point of arrival, where the VMs are going to. In a VMware environment, we'll vMotion the VMs to an NFS storage, which basically, it's a critical component because it takes the VMs off of the production storage so that when we're crunching through there doing the conversions, that it's not impacting the infrastructure where the production VMs are running, right?
Is that just a temporary space if you want to?
It's just a shared storage location that both your POD has visibility into, your point of arrival, and your tool set, right, can talk to it.
So you're not actually spending time shipping those blocks from one place to the other, right? Kind of makes it easier for you to
right.
You're at a fill rig or something.
It's like think of it like a staging area. Yeah. All So on migration day, and this again, think about this process when I say people, process, technology, right? So migration day, we got to stop the VMs. This is where we've got identified groups of VMs that are going to be migrated, and folks go in there, the business or the application owner goes in there, and they stop these VMs. We can't migrate a VM that's still running, right? The request then gets submitted, and then this piece right here is, I mean, that's really the technology is right here, right? A lot of this stuff is process related, but this is where the migration state machine, that's where it actually is doing the automated conversion of the VM in that shared storage location we were talking about, and then gets it converted, stood up onto the point of arrival, right? The next step is the post-migration configuration and application startup. So again, the VMs have been migrated. We're tracking this process, right? All along the way, we know exactly where that VM conversion is in that workflow. So it gets to the post-migration part, and now we got to do configuration, application startup on the other side, test it, and then that's the application owner validates, right? So the owner goes in there, validates, makes sure that we're good. Post-migration, so typically, once that VM is up in its new platform, we got to update systems of record. Sometimes maybe there's some kind of CMDB or catalog that needs to be updated. This can be done through our automated workflow. And then the cleanup of the old workload is kind of an agreement between the ops guys, the application team, the owners that says, after a certain amount of time, we're ready to retire that legacy environment. Okay, we have now trusted where it is. This VM's up, the application's available, we're using it, we don't need it anymore. So then you can retire it, get rid of it, and reclaim those resources, right? And then the decommission VM from the POD, which is that process, and then you're at the end of the completed process. So this kind of drives through, kind of shows you the different steps of what happens on the pre-migration, which we went through, and then the migration day, and then the post-migration activities that occur. Just kind of gives you those swim lanes of actions that need to happen. In your environment, you're probably, there's going to be different steps that need to happen. It's more than just converting the VMs, more than just taking it off of, say, VMware and putting it onto OpenStack. But there's going to be things that need to be, it's going to have to be registered here. There's other automated steps that need to happen. And so we can put that in the workflow within CloudForms, so CloudForms is doing the management of this process, and we can orchestrate those activities. So this is just a slide, just how we're powering it, the technology at Red Hat. So we've got the Red Hat Cloud Suite, right? So there's the management piece. I mean, that's kind of small for you guys. Yeah, go ahead.
So this is basically giving you the technology that's used to actually power your cloud migration from Red Hat, right? So you probably need a management platform that actually can understand both the old and the new platforms. So if you're actually looking to migrate from one to the other, you probably should be able to understand both platforms. So what here we're showing is the technology that's actually used to actually do the migration. So most of the management, automation, and orchestration is actually happening by the Red Hat CloudForms product. And it actually has the ability to talk to different providers like VMware, Red Hat Enterprise Virtualization, OpenStack, and it also has the ability to talk to public cloud providers like Amazon, Azure, and Google Compute. So because it actually spans across both private and public cloud environments, it has the ability to move workloads from one to the other.
So the pre-migration processes, automated discovery of VMs and application characteristics. So we actually go through, and when we identify these VM groups that we're going to move, we're going to understand what those dependencies are. And then we're going to get them tagged, what's considered what we call tagging. We'll go in there and create these migration groups. And then, this process kind of helps reduce the risk of the VMware application characteristics that may not be well documented, understood throughout the organization, right? So this helps kind of organize that for you to think through it better and to make it easier to plan for. We build a taxonomy and we identify and group all these things together using our tags, what's called smart tags within CloudForms. So executing the migration, we configure a state machine. The state machine in CloudForms is where all of the orchestration is happening, right? I mean, that's where the ordered step of activities is occurring in that state machine. So we'll create a custom state machine template, a custom workflow for the environment. Each environment's a little unique, so we'll create those workflows, and then define a migration window to ensure the VM ordering dependencies and all that's being managed throughout the process. Then we implement this push button self-service. So it's actually, we create the self-service catalog for the migration, so folks can actually go in there and order what's called like a batch migrate, and that may be a group of 10 VMs. It could be 50 or 100 VMs, right? They literally hit that button, batch migrate. CloudForms goes out there and detects those VMs as part of that migration group and only acts on those VMs. As that's occurring through, again, I was telling you, it's monitoring the process. So we're able to tell successes, failures. We can actually go, if there is a failure, we can actually start back that process exactly knowing where it failed. So we don't have to go back all the way to the very start of the line and do things that actually worked well, and maybe there was some web service that wasn't responding or timing out, and we can actually start it back from right there. Okay, so this is the solution portfolio. This is the open management discovery session. That's kind of where it starts, right? We'll walk in with the customer and get a conference room with the right stakeholders, the right people in place, and we'll begin to kind of go through their environment and discover, what their current infrastructure is, what their business requirements are, what the drivers are, and start to pull this data in and document it. Once we've gotten that understanding in place, they know, everybody's kind of on the same page. There's a plan now to get moving, and we'll begin what's called a smart start. And that is just, so that's kind of just a smaller scale step into that water, right? It's not a boil the ocean approach. We'll start out small. We'll identify a group of VMs. We'll go in there and get those converted. The design workshop is a little more involved because that's going to be very low level, down into the weeds of their full design architecture, all the documentation that goes with that, working with their engineers and come up with the solution for the larger enterprise. We'll operationalize their infrastructure, provide a self-service catalog for them so that, again, the tool set that's managing this process to do the migration also provides them CMP. It gives them a cloud management platform. That gives them self-service catalogs, so now they can go in and order services in multiple infrastructures wherever that needs to go. Automate the workloads, workload migration. So this is kind of the portfolio, the framework that we follow.
You can skip this.
All right.
You want to just go to the demo?
Yeah. So let me get that set up. I'll get the demo fired up here.
So while he's actually setting up for the demo, I'll probably have a few questions. The fact that you were here in this room, you probably had a reason to come here. So what were you thinking about cloud migration? Or do you actually have anything in your environment that you're looking to migrate?
I was really looking to learn about it.
Okay. So anybody is looking at deploying OpenStack or deploying the next-gen platform in your environment?
It's a toss-up. Right now we got vCloud on we got bought out.
Okay.
They use vCloud, so I just moved all our infrastructure over here. So we have a whole play land on my side of the house. So it's between OpenStack and maybe something else. We got
So you're actually using vCloud as well. So is just vCloud or the vRealize suite?
So yeah, the whole suite. So that's on the infrastructure side, or like my group. Then I still manage the developers and stuff as well too. But they also use Amazon Cloud for depending on whose project they're on. But then there's still the internal. Hey, we don't have any hardware, so we have to deploy something here. So
Right.
what can we deploy?
So I think that's a common use case that I've seen with customers is you actually still have traditional virtualization. You have Amazon, and you're looking at something new, and you need something that actually can understand all those three environments. And at some point, you'll probably be looking at migrating workloads from one to the other. And that's why when we looked at our portfolio earlier, we said like you do the open management solution first is because you actually want to get your hands around all your infrastructures around, right? You want to understand what's in VMware, what's in Amazon, what's in OpenStack first, before you can then make decisions about where do I want to move my workloads to. And it's not about just moving workloads. It's because that's what we call bimodal. If you look at where the industry is going, VMware is probably considered mode 1, right? Amazon and OpenStack are considered mode 2 environments. So you'll probably have both mode 1 and mode 2, but you need a single pane of glass across both. And then have policies in place to then decide, like when an end user is coming and requesting my workloads, now where do I want to place my workloads? Should it go to VMware? Should it go to Amazon? Or should it go to OpenStack? So you should probably have that intelligence built into your management platform to actually make those decisions on behalf of your end users. So then your end users don't need to know where the workloads are going. All they need is a VM that they can start doing the work on, or a container to actually go and deploy their applications. So it's always good to actually have that management layer brought in first to understand your environments, and then actually build your migration. 9 out of 10 customers that I've been to where they actually wanted to migrate off an environment, it's always started with, let me first get a handle on my environment first. Let me have that single pane of glass across, and then I'll actually look to move. So usually migrations are a long journey. It's more than a couple of years to actually migrate off something. So it's good to actually get something in to get a handle around your environment before you look to migrate.
Out of curiosity, what did you see for your version of OpenStack versus the other offering you guys have with OpenShift v3? What would you see as far as the comparison and contrast between OpenShift v3
And OpenStack. So OpenShift v3 is still a containerized container platform, right? So yes, in the old days we used to call it the PaaS, but now we just call it the container platform because it is a platform we can run any container workload. It doesn't have to be stateless or stateful. You want to containerize your application, you run it on OpenShift. OpenShift v3 is basically that, right? It actually uses native Docker underneath it, and you actually use SC Linux for isolation, and actually has Kubernetes for orchestration on top of it. So where we see OpenStack is we actually see the kind of convergence of both OpenShift and OpenStack. So you'll probably see more and more of OpenShift being deployed on OpenStack for customers.
maybe like OpenShift v4?
So OpenShift v3 can still be deployed on OpenStack. The biggest hurdle that you have today is the OpenShift v3 has its own SDN layer, and OpenStack has its own SDN. So it'll probably still be at least a year out, where you'll probably see a convergence of that SDN network. So probably maybe v4. I'm not the product guy, so I cannot give you, but that's where the convergence is. That's where the work is, to actually converge that networking layer, so actually can take the advantages, because you can you already have a Cinder backend plugin, right? So you can always do the storage integration with OpenShift already. So it's the networking piece that still needs to be worked out. But we've seen almost every customer that we walk into, they are deploying OpenShift and OpenStack.
I switched to my hotspot. The Wi-Fi wasn't working too great. So anyway, I'm ready to go.
So what Matt is doing here is actually logging into our cloud management portal. So you'll probably see that when he logs in, it probably has access to both the VMware environment, the Rev environment, and the OpenStack environment.
Yeah, it does. So this is actually the OpenStack environment right here. We got one VM. Okay, you'll see the next VM show up when it comes over here right now. The existing VM.
So you'll probably see here, right, on the VMware side. So,
So
there are
these are-
3 VMs on the VMware side, right? You have 17.
Okay, so this guy is actually going to be the one that we migrate right here. It's in a powered down state. These other ones with the green arrow just kind of shows, hey, these are the VMs. The icons kind of represent what you're dealing with, right? You can see this is a Red Hat VM running on VMware infrastructure. The green arrow says it's running, and then this indicates how many snapshots have been taken. For now, this is the guy we're going to use. Remember when...
So I'm migrating both VMs, 6.2 and
I'm
6.3.
gonna just, yeah, sorry. This guy right here. So let me show you the tags that we put on here. These tags just kind of indicate, they're just metadata, right, for automation to use. The point of arrival tag is saying, okay, this is going to my OpenStack provider. And I was telling you about the migration groups. That's where you would, it's typically by application or by some tier. And we'll define the group, and then we'll tag those VMs with the migration group tags. In this case, it's just demo, right? So I'm going to go back up here, and I go to my service catalog, click on migration, do a batch migrate, right? You just order this guy up, you select the migration group, in this case was demo. Click on submit. So he's currently, that VM that we're looking at is running on VMware. Sitting on VMware. It's not over here on OpenStack.
So what's happening here is it actually has gone and checked, and first thing it does, it checks and sees VM is up and running. If it's actually up and running, it actually flags a message back saying it cannot do a migration because it's up and running. But in this case, he actually picked a VM that was already shut down. So it's actually going through the process in the back of doing a snapshot of the VM, because we never actually work on the pristine production copy, just so that if something fails, you can always come back to your VM. So it takes a snapshot. It actually is moving that into your NFS share that VMware and OpenStack have access to. And as it's doing that, when it goes, it actually uses the open source Vert V2V tooling to actually convert a VMware instance into an OpenStack ready instance. As a part of the process, if it is actually a Windows VM, it actually also injects the drivers you need for Windows to actually run in an OpenStack environment. If it's a Linux environment, you probably don't need some of those drivers. It actually just does the conversion. And once it's done, it actually uploads it into OpenStack. So it started converting the image.
Yep. So this is where, as an operator, if you've triggered this is kind of where you can monitor where you're at in that whole process. So as it's converting right now, it's running Vert V2V, right? It's getting that going. We do use OVA. So once, kind of regardless of what the point of departure is, right? We'll convert that to an OVA, because once we get it into OVA format, now we can take it and deploy it anywhere we want, any infrastructure. So that's what we do, and then that's already been done, and then now he's working on the actual Vert V2V, which is streaming it directly into Cinder and creating a Cinder volume that it will boot from on the OpenStack side.
The common, it doesn't have to be NFS, does it, for the shared storage, it could be zip share?
Well, you're what we call the provider, whether it's OpenStack or Rev or VMware, whatever it is, can be any format you want. Okay, now if you're using block storage, that's fine.
So the only downside of Ceph right now is Ceph cannot be used as a backend for VMware. So you can definitely have Ceph as a backend for OpenStack and actually move this VM, and it'll create a volume on Ceph and boot from it. But because you don't have the ability to share a SelfStorage to VMware, the initial backing store for that migration process is going to be NFS. Once you actually get it to NFS and do your migration, then you actually upload it into Ceph and boot it from Ceph.
It's just a temporary
Yeah, so none of it is usually at.
Did it have to be integrated?
The shared, the,
Could it be a zip share?
we could probably figure that out right now, the way the solution is designed, because it's easier. File storage is just easier to deal with in the machine. Yeah, it is. It just makes sense. It really works well for that. I mean, that storage is dedicated to the migration infrastructure. So when we set up the migration factory, part of that, big component of that is that centralized shared storage. It's just part of it, right? It makes it work. For us, what we found is that when it is file-based, when it is NFS-based, it's just a non-issue, right? It just works, and we can focus on other things. But it has nothing to do with the actual storage you're using on your actual infrastructure for you're running live VMs. Yeah.
So it's actually extracting the VM decays. It actually finished the migration. So if you go to OpenStack,
So if I go over here and I refresh this screen now, there it is.
you saw a VM that actually landed in OpenStack now.
Yeah.
And
And so now, let me. What I'm going to do is get in here. I'm going to SSH in, but I had to 40. I guess it doesn't really matter. 4. I'm going to show you guys. Hold on a minute. Just going to SSH to that guy. 204s. Oh, sorry. I had hit my caps lock button there. All right. Okay, so he's probably not up yet.
Is this the VM?
Or he may be powering up. So he is responding. That's the actual VM on
You should be able to
OpenStack.
bring the console up, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, just click on the console and you should probably see it.
So he may be coming up. Let's get over here. He could be in a booting process right now. He's certainly responding on ping. So let me see if I can actually SSH in now. Yeah, I think it's going to let me in this time.
So any questions on the migration process that you've seen so far? Anything that more you'd like to know? Okay.
So we're in. So this guy is actually, again, he didn't exist a second ago. He's now running on OpenStack. He's powered off because we started powered off on VMware. He's still powered off. And now we're connected to him over in OpenStack. And this is actually a new IP that he got in OpenStack as well. And I validated that through SSH. I can connect.
Does it do, so you still have to go into actually do remediation as far as the IP addresses and host names and stuff like that?
No, we actually put the host name and IP in. So the OpenStack could be on a different network. In this case, he is connected. In my environment, it's connected to a different network. So I just identify the IP I want him to have when he comes up.
So you actually can set it up that it actually gets the same IP, because in most enterprises, you probably have your firewall rules defined based on an IP address. And if you have a web server connected to a database server, if your IP changes, then your firewall rules change. And most of the times, that's not automated. So if you want to preserve the IP as a part of the migration, you actually can set it up. So it'll actually come up with the same IP. The only thing is that on the target side, you have to create those networks and make sure that that network is routable across your enterprise.
Yeah. So again, we were talking about the state machines. I know we're probably about to wrap, but the state machine in CloudFormance is kind of where the orchestration is occurring, and all these represent different automations that are occurring through the process in the migration workflow. So this thing is actually using CloudForms and OpenStack. It's talking to OVF tool to create the OVA, and it's also doing Vert V2V to do the actual conversion.
Out of curiosity, if it's something like the code blocks,
Yeah, so CloudForms actually has the ability to talk to Infoblox APIs. So if you actually want to kind of work with Infoblox to get IPs, you can. The only downside to that is OpenStack plugin with Infoblox, at least with our distribution, is not fully certified. It's still upstream. So when it gets certified, you'll be able to use the Infoblox plugin for your DNS and IPAM. Yeah. Yeah, it hasn't been blessed yet. Because the Neutron environment actually has gone through quite a few changes over the last few releases. So Infoblox had to rewrite quite a few times. Okay. Thank you. I think we're ready for the next session.